Stay 3 steps behind me, don't talk unless spoken to, and try not to embarrass me in front of executive management. Those were my husband's exact words before we walked into his company's annual gala. For 5 years, Richard treated me like an unemployed housewife whose existence was a minor inconvenience to his corporate ladder. He had no idea about my actual career. He thought my long trips were for low-level logistics consulting. So when he shoved me into a corner near the buffet to fawn over his billionaire CEO, I kept quiet and let him play the big shot. But when CEO Raymond Vance scanned the room and his eyes locked onto mine, he froze. He pushed past Richard, marched straight over to my corner, came to a crisp attention, and said, "Lieutenant Colonel Vance reporting, ma'am. I've finally found you. My name is Natalie Walker. I'm 42 years old, and for the past 15 years, I've held the rank of Lieutenant Colonel in the United States Army, specializing in strategic logistics and intelligence division operations. To the Pentagon, I am a seasoned officer capable of coordinating complex supply chains across hostile territories. But to my husband of 5 years, Richard, I was nothing more than an unemployed, plain housewife whose daily existence was a minor inconvenience to his corporate ambitions. When Richard and I married, I deliberately kept my military career low profile. I was transitioning into high-level reserve status, and after years of grueling deployments, I wanted a quiet, grounded, personal life. Richard knew I did remote logistics consulting that required occasional travel, but his own vanity prevented him from ever asking a single follow-up question. He assumed I made peanuts doing basic data entry from my laptop. Over the years, his mild condescension turned into outright disrespect. He loved playing the big-shot corporate power player, constantly belittling my intelligence and treating me like an embarrassing accessory he had to hide from his peers. Tonight was the annual corporate gala for Apex Global, the multi-billion-dollar enterprise where Richard worked as a senior project manager. He had been obsessing over this night for months, convinced that a face-to-face interaction with the executive board would secure his long-awaited promotion to vice president. As I walked downstairs in a simple, elegant black tailored dress, Richard looked me up and down with disgust. "Is that really what you're wearing?" he sneered, adjusting his cufflinks. "You look like an ant heading to a church supper. Just stay 3 steps behind me, don't open your mouth, and try not to embarrass me in front of executive management." The grand ballroom of the Grand Hyatt was packed with the city's corporate elite. A sea of sharp tuxedos, shimmering evening gowns, and heavy perfume. Crystal chandeliers cast a bright, unforgiving glow over the room as servers glided between clusters of executives carrying trays of champagne. The moment we stepped through the double doors, Richard's demeanor shifted entirely. The sneer he had directed at me in the car vanished, replaced by a smooth, rehearsed smile as he prepared to network his way to a vice presidency. He didn't walk beside me. Instead, he gripped my elbow tightly and steered me straight toward the back corner of the room, near the catering staff's exit doors and the edge of the buffet line. "Stay right here," he whispered sharply, his voice laced with warning. "I'm going over to the board members' table. Do not wander around and definitely don't try to join any conversations. I need people focusing on my accomplishments tonight, not wondering why my wife looks like she got lost on her way to a library." Before I could even respond, he turned on his heel and disappeared into the crowd. From my spot near the back, I watched him seamlessly blend into a group of regional directors. Within minutes, his loud, boisterous laugh echoed across the dining area. I caught snippets of his conversation as he held court, boasting about leading high-stakes operations, taking full credit for projects handled by his junior staff, and casually dismissing his home life. When a colleague politely asked about his wife, Richard chuckled dismissively, waving a hand in the air. "Oh, Natalie? She's a simple homebody, prefers staying out of the big leagues. Honestly, it's better for everyone if she keeps to the background. I didn't flinch. Decades in military intelligence teach you to observe without reacting, to read a room long before you make a move. I stood quietly, sipping my water, watching my husband parade around a room full of people he was desperate to impress. He thought he was playing the long game, completely blind to the fact that his arrogance was setting the trap for his own downfall. Suddenly, the room fell quiet as the heavy oak doors at the main entrance swung open. Raymond Vance, the legendary founder and chief executive officer of Apex Global, stepped into the ballroom flanked by his top security detail and senior vice presidents. Vance was a reclusive billionaire known for his ruthless business acumen and impenetrable exterior. He rarely attended these regional galas, making his presence tonight an unprecedented event that instantly sent a ripple of electric tension through the crowd. Richard's eyes widened with pure, unadulterated greed. Seeing Vance in person was the ultimate opportunity he had been dreaming about for months. Without hesitating, Richard elbowed his way through the gathering crowd of executives, ignoring the annoyed glances of his colleagues as he forced his way to the front of the receiving line. He smoothed down his suit jacket, plastered on his most confident corporate smile, and stepped directly into Vance's path with an outstretched hand, ready to deliver his rehearsed pitch for the VP position. "Mr. Vance, what an absolute honor! I'm Richard Reed, Senior Project Manager," he declared loudly, his voice dripping with eager desperation. Vance didn't even look at the outstretched hand. He stopped dead in his tracks, his sharp, stern gaze completely passing over Richard as if he were invisible. Vance's eyes scanned the vast ballroom, searching intently past the sea of suits and evening gowns, until his gaze abruptly locked onto the back corner of the room. He froze, his expression transforming from cold indifference to absolute, stunned recognition as he stared directly at me. Without saying a word to the surrounding directors, CEO Raymond Vance stepped around Richard, leaving my husband standing with his hand frozen in midair. The entire ballroom fell into a hushed silence as Vance walked with quick, purposeful strides straight toward the back corner of the room, near the catering doors. The crowd parted for him, every executive straining to see which high-powered investor or board member the billionaire was so eager to greet. Richard hurried behind him, his face flushed with confusion. "Mr. Vance, sir, that's just the buffet area. My wife is over there. She's just a homebody. She doesn't—" Vance ignored Richard entirely. He stopped 2 feet in front of me, his back straightened into a posture of rigid, unmistakable military precision. Before the shocked eyes of his entire executive team, the billionaire CEO came to a crisp, formal attention and snapped a sharp salute. "Lieutenant Colonel Walker," Vance said, his voice carrying clearly across the quiet ballroom. He lowered his hand and offered a warm, deeply respectful handshake. "I've finally found you, ma'am. I've been trying to track down your official contact info through the Department of Defense for 2 years. A murmur swept through the crowd, but Vance continued, looking at me with genuine reverence. "7 years ago in Kandahar, when our convoy was ambushed in the valley, you were the tactical commander who coordinated the air support and extraction unit that saved 32 soldiers, including me. I was just a young captain in logistics back then. The operational discipline you displayed that night inspired everything I built here at Apex Global. I owe my life, and this entire company, to your leadership." Richard stood entirely frozen, the color completely draining from his face as the reality of what he was hearing sank in. The plain housewife he had spent 5 years belittling, the woman he had shoved into a corner so she wouldn't embarrass him, was a decorated United States Army lieutenant colonel who had saved his CEO's life in a war zone. Around us, the vice presidents and directors looked at me with newfound awe, their murmurs rippling through the ballroom. "Lieutenant Colonel Walker," CEO Vance said, turning back to address me with complete seriousness, We are currently restructuring our global supply chain and risk management division at Apex Global. We need a chief logistics officer who understands high-stakes operations under pressure. I want you on our executive board. The offer is yours if you'll take it. I smiled politely. I appreciate the extraordinary offer, Mr. Vance. I'm currently transitioning into senior advisory roles, so I would certainly be open to discussing it. Vance's gaze then shifted to Richard, who was trembling, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "And who is this?" Vance asked, his voice dropping into a cold, professional tone. "He was following me over here." I looked at Richard, letting a quiet, calm silence stretch for a moment before I spoke. "This is Richard Reed, a senior project manager at your company, and my husband, at least, for now." Before you arrived, Mr. Vance, Richard instructed me to stay 3 steps behind him, keep my mouth shut, and make sure I didn't embarrass him in front of executive management. He believed my presence here was an inconvenience to his career. Vance's eyes narrowed into sharp steel as he looked at Richard, whose jaw dropped in absolute horror. "You instructed a decorated lieutenant colonel to stay out of sight?" Vance asked, his voice dripping with icy contempt. "An officer who commanded strategic intelligence units while you were sitting in air-conditioned offices taking credit for your team's work?" Vance turned to his chief legal officer, who had hurried over during the commotion. "I want an immediate, top-to-bottom internal audit of Richard Reed's department starting tonight. Review every project he has submitted over the last 3 years, check the primary contributions of his junior staff, and verify if he's been falsifying performance metrics or usurping credit from female subordinates. If there is a single breach of corporate ethics, terminate his contract immediately without severance." Richard's knees buckled and he grabbed the edge of a nearby high-top table to keep from collapsing. "Mr. Vance, please. It was a misunderstanding. I didn't know. Natalie, tell him I was just joking." I looked at him with absolute detachment. For 5 years I had tolerated his insecurity, his patronizing remarks, and his relentless attempts to shrink my existence to make himself feel larger. I had kept my quiet dignity, not because I was weak, but because I didn't need to bark to prove my strength. "I'm not telling him anything, Richard," I said, my voice calm, clear, and unbothered. "You made it very clear that you view me as an embarrassment. But the truth is, you were projecting your own feelings of inadequacy onto me." I reached into my small clutch bag, pulled out a folded envelope I had prepared days ago after he made yet another cruel comment about my worth, and placed it firmly against his chest. "These are divorce papers," I said, as the room watched in dead silence. "You wanted to protect your corporate image, Richard. Now you can manage it entirely on your own." The audit into Richard's department revealed years of stolen credit and systematic performance inflation, leading to his swift termination from Apex Global and a ruined reputation across the industry. Within 6 months, our divorce was finalized quietly and completely. I officially accepted CEO Raymond Vance's offer to join Apex Global as the Senior Vice President of Strategic Logistics, effectively balancing my high-level corporate advisory role with my ongoing reserve duties for the Pentagon. Stepping into my new executive office on the top floor, looking out over the city skyline, I reflected on the journey that brought me here. For years, I had allowed someone else's insecurity to dictate how brightly I could shine, believing that staying quiet was the same as keeping the peace. But true peace comes from knowing your own worth and standing firmly in your authority, regardless of who tries to dim your light. Real strength never needs to shout. It simply waits for the right moment to act. What would you have done if you were in my shoes at that gala? Would you have confronted him sooner, or let the truth play out on its own? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to read your perspectives. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next uploading. Thank you for watching.